Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and now on Blue Sky at Hawk Blogger. And it is a fun day, a fun Tuesday here in Seattle as we get to talk to our good friend Mike Randle of FTN Fantasy. And Mike, I got to tell you, man, you join us on a special day. I'm going to play this for you real quick and thank all 13,000 of you who have
Wow.
become subscribers for the channel. We hit that milestone yesterday. Appreciate all of you. We're building something special here. And Mike, you and FTN have been a great part of it. Our first partner that I signed up. So thank you guys for all the support through the year.
Oh, well deserved. First thing I saw when I came aboard was the charitable works that you're doing with the community, with Seattle. Brian, you are a class guy. This is a great show. The fans of the Seahawks are wonderful. We're honored to be a part of it here. And don't look now, you got a 2-game winning streak, Brian. Things are good here.
Unreal. You know what? It has been a long time coming to be able to talk about not only the Seahawks winning 2 games in a row, which they hadn't done since week 3, but having a defense, Mike. I actually just posted this before the show because I have access to FTN DVOA data because I'm a subscriber. You can be too. HBAM is the promo code, gets you 15% off. Mike, looking at the Seahawks defensive DVOA ranks the last few years, 2021, 20, 2022, 22nd, 2023, 28th. If you notice, that's going the wrong direction where you want your rank to be. Through 12 weeks now, the Seahawks DVOA rank is 13th in the NFL. Mike Macdonald, what are you seeing from that Seahawks defense from another Mike Randle?
Well, first, we're seeing health, which is something you and I talked about all season, which you did not have, to be fair. But now you're seeing the schemes. You're seeing a lot of the success he had with Baltimore. You hold the Cardinals offense with everything they've done this year to 6 points, and you sack Kyler Murray 5 times. You are peaking at the right time. And it says something, Brian, about how coaching matters. Sure, it's the first year for Macdonald. We get it. But he has a strong pedigree. He knows how to coach defense. You knew he was going to get it right. And you're looking at your opponent this week that is going in the complete opposite direction here. So it feels like the Seahawks are peaking at the right time, which I've seen historically here on the East Coast many years when Russ was there. End of the season, 5-game winning streaks, 6-game winning streaks. Things are really coming together. That was not just a win against the Cardinals. It was really impressive the way you won the game with your defense.
You know, it's a great point you bring up about building towards the end of the season, and the used to be a hallmark of Pete Carroll's teams was that he would build not only toward the fourth quarter of games, but towards the end of the season and try to be better. I'm wondering how much that's going to have to do with just a young team, which the Seahawks are right now, and they do seem like they're building towards something interesting on the other side of the country, Mike. The New York Jets seem like they are falling apart, and I guess that would kind of imply they ever had anything together. What's going on there in your part of the world?
Yeah, what's going on, Brian, is winning is difficult. You can't just put one person or one thing into a system and win. Tom Brady, greatest quarterback ever for my money, goes down to Tampa Bay, plays in Tampa Bay, wins a title. Now, why did he win that title? Because everyone followed him and because he happened to have a coach in Bruce Arians who sort of let him do what he needs to do. Aaron Rodgers comes over and they follow a copycat script. It's not going to work. They don't have the talent. They didn't have the head coach in place to make it work. The organization has fallen apart. Offensively, they don't look good. They're bringing in every piece, a Jenga puzzle, and it just keeps falling. And the defense, which has been the hallmark of this team, no Robert Saleh, and you can say what you want about him. He knew defense. He was successful defensively with this team, even last year with Zach Wilson. They are struggling on both ends of the field. I mean, just look at Anthony Richardson. Look what the Colts did 2 weeks ago at New York, and look what they did at home to the Lions. It just shows you the chasm of difference. This is a great spot for you here. Always tough going West Coast to East Coast, but a great spot against a team right now that is like catching the falling knife.
So, Mike, I all that makes sense, and we're going to talk like we do every week about who has had success against this Jets defense in fantasy, and we'll talk about what positions have success. I go to the FTN betting model today, and I pull it up, and I look at this game where the Seahawks are currently favored by 2.5 points, and the model is projecting the Jets to win this game 20-19, so pretty close. But that caught my attention. What do you think's going on there?
Yeah, I just think that it's a road game and we expect it to be a coin flip game. And a lot of times, Brian, when you have an edge, a team getting points, it can be a 1-point edge, or we can just see a discrepancy in the model where we think that there is an advantage. But I will point out that it's only a 5.74% edge. So we're projecting this as a coin flip game. The edges that are placed for us officially are 10% or higher. So while you do see an edge there, I won't say it's the greatest edge. And I think it's just indicative of the season, which has seen teams who are favored on the road struggle above a 60% clip. That being said, the Jets are not a play for me this week.
Well, other teams in the NFC West also matter. The Cardinals go to play the Vikings, and the Vikings are currently about a 3.5 or 4-point favorite. The model has the Vikings winning that game, but a close one. I mean, 22.6 to 21.9 is the projected score in that one.
Yeah, the issue there is the turnovers. It's Sam Darnold. The Vikings had a tremendous amount of luck, Brian, this year in getting turnovers to go their way. Perfect example I can give you is the game that was over in England. That game they should have lost to the Jets. They had too many turnovers. The Jets, who are struggling, made a move down the field at the end of the game. So those turnovers have to be limited. Yes, they're very talented, but their offensive line can be had a little bit, and their front seven is good, but their pass defense is weak. So there is an opportunity and a path here for the Cardinals to make a move. But like you said, it's not a 10% edge. Some of the larger edges we had last week, my favorite one was the Panthers getting points against the Chiefs. That was our biggest side edge. So when it gets over 10%, that's really where it's a look. But it's just worth noting that we think it's going to be a close game, not just Seattle and the Jets, but Cardinals and Vikings.
That's an impressive that's a feather in the cap of the model, picking the Panthers there. And folks, you get access to the model predictions. You get access to the Discord channel. You get access to Stats Hub, which is the best insight engine for the NFL out there. Use promo code HBAM, gets you 15% off, less than $8 a month. Is a great deal. I'm a subscriber. I use it every day. Next, Rams at Saints. That has the Rams are a 2.5 to 3-point favorite on the road. New Orleans is coming off a bye week, and the model has the New Orleans Saints winning this game 28-25.
Yeah, that to me is a strong play. Of all the games that you mentioned, and it goes back to your analysis the last couple of weeks. You talked about the Rams. You're seeing a team that people thought was maybe a little bit better than they really were. There are some warts on the line. There are some warts on the defense here. Now you're going on the road, team coming off a bye, Taysom Hill, all the things that are going on with the Saints. That's a rough spot to have a road favorite. It doesn't add up to me because I just think the Rams and Saints are pretty close this year. So you're going to give me points with the home team. I'll take it. That will be one of our plays for sure.
Last one in the NFC West, San Francisco 49ers travel to the Bills, and 49ers are reeling. They are between 6.5 and 7-point underdogs on the road in Buffalo. The model only has the Bills winning 23-22. Why do you think it's that close?
I just think that when you have a team that's playing really well this year and the last few years, you want to fade them. And when you have a team that's playing poorly, the market and the betting public tend to overrate it. If Brock Purdy plays in this game, they're going to be competitive with the Bills. I don't think the Bills are that much better than the rest of the league. They have beat two winning teams so far this year, teams that had winning records when they played them. Josh Allen has been solid, but the turnovers can happen. They haven't been great running the ball, Brian, and the Niners defense should show up. So to me, this is absolutely a close game, especially when the public just saw the Niners get blown out by the Packers and see the Bills as a top 3 team in the league. I don't see that. I think this game is close. It's too many points.
What do you think, getting back to the Jets-Seahawks game, what do you think the weaknesses are of that Jets team, or where do you think the Seahawks can attack them?
Yeah, I think you can attack them in multiple areas. One, I think you can attack them with running backs coming out of the backfield. Remember, the Jets lost against New England earlier this year. Ramondre Stevenson had 2 touchdowns. He also caught 3 passes coming out of the backfield. I think there are opportunities to get pressure on them and to turn them over. So I think the The advantages you have are you're going to be able to spread out the Jets defense, which most teams have not been able to do. Remember, even when the Jets ended up playing Houston, that was a limited Houston team. Their top wide receiver was Tank Dell. That was it. So the secondary, Sauce Gardner, we're getting rid of the nickname Sauce here on the East Coast because he's getting burned way too many times. So I think the Jets defense has been able to sustain when they don't have a strong passing attack and they can try to focus. They're going to have to pick your poison with the Seahawks. Either Kenneth Walker is going to have a monster game and attack them on the ground, or Geno's going to have opportunities to attack them through the air. Don't sleep on the revenge game against Geno also. A nice little narrative there. But I think you present difficult challenges for them because the teams that they've had success or kept close don't have both areas of the field that they can dominate. Vikings were rolling them, and then Aaron Jones got hurt in that game in England. And so in this situation, you're healthy, you're 3 wideouts, you're running backs. This is going to be a problem.
Well, switching sides here, you mentioned the Anthony Richardson game. I was shocked when I looked at this. The top players against the Jets defense, they've given up their 2 highest passing yardage games in the last 2 weeks that they've played. Week 10, they gave up 266 yards, 1 touchdown to Kyler Murray. Week 11, they gave up 272 yards and a touchdown to Anthony Richardson. They have given up passer rating games, 4 passer rating games of over 106. Really, in the last few games. So Josh Allen had one of those. Russell Wilson had one of those. Kyler Murray and Anthony Richardson. And you also mentioned the receiving out of the backfield. I did notice that one of the biggest receiving yardage games of the year is James Conner, the running back for the Cardinals, had 80 yards against the Jets not so long ago. So interesting to see them kind of decaying as a pass defense team.
Yeah, not only decaying, I mean, they are 25th in pass defense per DVOA. And we talked about that last week. That's above the average. 2 spots. I mean, talk about playing the Seattle Seahawks and having these numbers. They're 29th in DVOA against opposing wide receiver 1s. And they're 28th in DVOA against opposing wide receiver 3s. So I don't know if you want to say JSN or Lockett is your wide receiver 3, but I know who your wide receiver 1 is. They are weakest and have been performing the worst in pass defense against 2 of your best players. The only thing I would worry about, Brian, if I ask you for one statistic, you tell me the turnovers in this game. If Seattle wins a turnover battle, they're not losing this game. It's really that simple to me because you're better on both sides of the ball.
100%. Well, and before I let you go, Mike, I've got some, you've earned something. You've earned something you don't even know. And I'm going to cue you up with this will tell you exactly what you've earned.
Time to rise and shine, it's clear. HB Morning's voicemail's here. Play and laugh, let go of fear. Start your day with cheer, my dear.
Sir, you have qualified for your first voicemail from a listener who has wanted to ask you a question. Here it is.
I don't hear it.
You don't hear it?
I don't hear it. No, sorry. I didn't hear it. No.
Oh, no. Okay, sorry. Let me get that back for you. Let's bring that back. Here you go.
The way the NFC looks, there's no reason why we can't win 1, maybe even 2 playoff games. I do have a fantasy football question for the Tuesday segment. Garrett Wilson has been struggling lately, and JSN has been balling lately. Should I just keep rocking with JSN for the rest of the season, even though JSN has a tough matchup against New York secondary this week? All right, go Hawks.
All right, Mike, you got your first voicemail. What do you say?
Well, I'm honored here. That's a really great question. I go back to my rankings, and this is going to be really funny, Brian. I rank by half point PPR, so this could change depending on the format. Wouldn't you know it, I have JSN my wide receiver 19 this week, right behind DK. And I have Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 20. So that tells you Wilson gets the volume, but I cannot sit JSN right now. And certainly with those numbers I gave you, remember JSN plays more of the prototypical wide receiver 3 role. I know it's hard to assign depending on how, the teams line up, but with those numbers, the last 2 weeks he's done, I get it. Garrett Wilson is still dealing with Devontae Adams' target share. I am not benching Wilson. It's close. It's a good question, but I'm going to ride with the hot hand. I have JSN as 1 spot higher than Garrett Wilson.
Amazing. Mike, thank you as always for joining, and thanks FTN for the support. Folks, if you have not gone to ftnfantasy.com, signed up using promo code HBAM, get yourself 15% off, less than $8 a month. I'm a subscriber. It is amazing. Mike, have a great rest of your week. I'll be in there in New York. Maybe I'll run into you at the Meadowlands.
Excellent. Would love it, man. I'll buy you a beer. Excellent.
All right. Sounds good. All right. That is Mike Randle of FTN Fantasy. And now we've got switch gears. It is going to be one of our favorite guests, someone who adds something that nobody else can, which is true coaching insights to the Seahawks and to the NFL in general, to football. Coach Cody Alexander joins us again to help us answer the question, how has Mike Macdonald done it? How has he taken one of what was the worst defensive teams in the NFL for a good 4 or 5 weeks and turned them into one of the best? First of all, Cody, welcome. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, doing great. Really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. It's great to have you back. You got big Thanksgiving plans? What do you guys do for Thanksgiving?
Oh, yeah. My parents live near us, and my in-laws live real close too. So we'll have Thanksgiving with both the families, and it'll just be a big get together.
Do you have a priority order of your Thanksgiving foods? Like, is there something that's your go-to that you first thing on the buffet that you go after?
I'm a big ham guy, and
Okay.
so I will definitely be destroying a ham. So that's
nice.
Multiple. Yeah. But I usually get in trouble because I start eating the ham the moment I show up.
Love it. All right. Well, last time we spoke to you, Cody, and again, great stuff at matchquarters.com. Folks should check him out there, as well as at Field Vision. Field Vision's been doing great stuff this year, but we were trying to figure out what was going wrong. Like, what had happened to this team? They were reeling after just giving up play after play on the ground and the air. Last 3 weeks, it's been a different story. Let's talk about, obviously, there's scheme changes, there's personnel changes. Where do you want to start? Which one of those has your attention first?
Well, I think it has to do with personnel. I think if you're going to start somewhere, is it a schematic? Has he changed the way he's doing something, or has it been personnel? And I think it's 100% the personnel that they have now compared to what they had at the beginning of the season. Yeah.
What jumps out to you on the personnel side? Because there's a number of changes there.
Well, I think the one thing that is probably the catalyst for change is the trade for the Ernest Jones. That cleaned up a lot of issues in really the middle of the field, the middle of the box. That also added. He adds value in the sense that he's a really good pass rusher. I mean, he's one of the better pass rush off-ball linebackers in the NFL. That's what he really excelled at for the Rams last year. That gives Macdonald the ability, when he wants to add 5, because he is a 5-man pressure. I know that a lot of times the Ravens simulated pressure, basically meaning you show like you're going to bring 5 or more, but you only rush 4. They tend to get a lot of the play on that, but that's not really true. The NFL is very much a 5-man pressure league, and having a guy like Jones really expands that. Now, they're not pressuring any more than they were before. It's just now they have a guy that can win a one-on-one.
Mike Macdonald has been, I don't know the right word for it. I wouldn't quite say defiant, but definitely repeated the comment that he feels like they have disproven this notion that some of these middle of the field defenders are of lower value. So I'll give you more context. I asked him last week or the week before, if you had the number 1 pick in the draft and you were starting to build the defense and you could pick any position and know you were going to get the greatest possible player at that position, where would you start? And he said, conventional wisdom, you'd start with a pass rusher or someone there, but I wouldn't discount these guys in the middle, the inside linebackers, the defensive tackles, the safeties, and specifically said, I think we've disproven the notion or debunked the theory that those guys aren't valuable. The Rams seem like they're on the opposite end. They knew they had a good player in Ernest Jones, but they don't value that position. What's your perspective on the value of that inside linebacker position relative to other positions on the field?
Well, it's one of those positions that I think you forget about until you need one. It's kind of like they're basically the running back of the defense in the sense that when you have a really good one, it really pops, right? Like Saquon Barkley going to the Eagles. You're like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's what a running back does when he adds value. Linebackers are kind of the same way, staying in the division. I mean, Fred Warner does so much for that 49ers defense that is really just by presence alone, or the ability to kind of cover ground. And when you don't have that, they really tend to struggle. So it's the same thing with the Seahawks, is that defensively, and much like what we're seeing offensively, you need to build from the inside out. So, when the big emphasis this offseason was paying offensive guards, paying interior defensive linemen, that's not just coincidence. That's typical roster design. You want to build from the inside out. That makes a lot of sense. The NFL game is played in the middle of the field. So what do you have to be strong at? You have to be strong on that inside. And that makes sense that a guy like Macdonald would be like, well, I'd actually build inside out. And primarily, I bet if you really forced him to answer, he probably says in interior defensive lineman first, and then making sure that every level back from that is solid.
Well, it's interesting you talk about Fred Warner. You mentioned him there. He started this year like defensive player of the year level. He was insane. The plays he was made, that Minnesota game, I mean, my eyes were popping out of my head. It was crazy the plays he's making. He has really kind of come back to earth in a way that I don't think he's come back to earth in past years. And you can talk about other players around him, but I'm curious, Cody, and we're talking to Coach Cody Alexander of matchquarters.com and Field Vision. Some people talk about variance in that linebacker position and that you can't count on those guys being good game to game or year to year because the league just makes it really hard in that position. What's your take on that?
Well, I think variance within scheme is probably more of a factor when you know where a guy is going to be every single time, you know exactly what his role is going to be. You then can really take advantage of that. And so that's where the variance in play comes from. I don't think people would then discount Fred Warner not being a good linebacker anymore. I think the problem at San Francisco is the fact that they've ran the same style of defense now for a long time. When people are playing really well, it works. When you're getting pressure on the quarterback, it works. It's the same regression that we're seeing with the Jets this year. I think a lot of it too has to do with there is a typical defensive regression if the offense is not also counterpunching. We see this all the time. Teams will start out elite defense for the first couple weeks. Offense sputters. Defense then begins to regress down to the mean because it's so hard when you have your back against the wall every single time. So I think it's a little bit of that. But the variance in play is something, especially on defense. Corner has the same thing. Last year, people didn't really want to talk about this, but Pat Surtain didn't really play very well last year. Now he's playing really well. Well, the defensive line's playing really well. Everybody around him's playing really well. Guess what? The offense isn't just absolutely abysmal. They're playing for a playoff spot. It's not surprising now that everybody's playing better, and so is Pat Surtain. So I think it's a multitude of things, but there is a high variance on defense.
So that's a interesting segue into another corner, happens to play for the Seahawks, name's Devin Witherspoon. And this is a guy that there were fans and media members who were kind of saying this guy's maybe a disappointment. He wasn't necessarily worth the pick. And sure enough, as soon as the defense starts turning it around and playing a little bit more soundly the last 3 weeks, every single week he has been a playmaker. What are you seeing from Devin Witherspoon?
Well, he is very unique in the NFL landscape because he truly can play 50-50 outside and inside. He is a dominant nickel if he moves inside, but then he is also very good when he moves outside. So the Seahawks don't lose anything by moving him out. We've seen this in other places where just for whatever reason, teams don't have an outside corner. They have to move somebody out there. He's a nickel. Now he moves out. And it's like, well, you basically get half the player. And so what we see with Witherspoon, though, is he can play inside and outside at that 50-50 split, and you don't really lose any production from him. I think he's one of the better corners in the NFL. He can play outside and he can play inside, which adds value. And I think that's what Macdonald wants out of all his defensive players, is that you have to have added value. If you just play one position and you can only play that really doesn't expand the defense very much. I think too, talking about personnel and going through that, and I know we're talking about Witherspoon, but that pickup of Robertson Harris has really allowed Macdonald to do different things up front, but keep the same personnel on the field. And so how does that then go to like somebody like Witherspoon? Well, Witherspoon now can kind of, if they need to get big, they can, and they don't lose anything by taking one of their best players off the field, or sacrifice something by saying, well, he's our best 11. We know they're going to run at him. So we'll just try and live through it. So that to me is where we're really seeing the production from the Seahawks.
You saw my reaction. I'm so happy you brought it, Roy Robertson Harris. I was going to bring him up because this is a guy that, of all the changes, of all the names, probably on the entire team, he's probably one of the least that anyone will mention. He's not going to get a lot of counting stats. For my money, like, I hadn't even heard of him, to be totally honest. When they made the trade, I did a show where I just went through his film and I was like, well, he doesn't do much, but the guy never moves back. He always pushes, like, he is physical and nasty. And I'm like, okay, they definitely need that. Talk about what you mean when you say his addition is helping a guy like Witherspoon. Help us connect those dots.
Well, the problem, it's kind of the chicken and an egg, right? Is it pass rush, or is it coverage? Is it coverage, or is it pass rush? If you're playing bad quarterbacks, it's pass rush. I mean, it's coverage, right? Because they're going to hold the ball. That allows a pass rush speed. When you play good quarterbacks, it is the pass rush. You have to be able to manipulate the pocket. You have to be able to push that. I think even too, just the run game. The run game looks completely different since the bye week. And a lot of it just has to be what you mentioned, which is just movement. I mean, getting Murphy back to having everybody healthy, being able to rotate Murphy out and not necessarily keep, like, he has to play all these downs, but keeping guys fresh. I think the other thing that he gives you, that Robertson Harris gives you, is the fact that he can play what's called a big five. So you don't have to have two edge rushers out there, which are two light guys, two outside linebacker hybrids. It helps you in the run game. You can keep your typical jackbacker, your edge rush guy. You can keep him to the boundary. You now have a solid presence to the field, meaning that offenses are really kind of getting bottlenecked. And guess what? You added a guy like Ernest Jones, who now is fitting the box really well. He can add in the pressure game. So what all does that do for the secondary? What that does for the secondary is that it allows them to be able to play without having to be like, I have to make a play, or I have to be latched onto this guy. I have to be perfect. When you're playing to be perfect, that's usually when mistakes are made. And so having a really good pass rush and being able to stop the run much better kind of gives you more predictability on the back end, which is just going to feed into the ability of that secondary.
One of the things that I've heard and paid attention to in the locker room and other places watching film is the linebackers. You talked about Ernest Jones. We also saw a change with Tyrese Knight taking over as well. But everyone talks about their effect on the run game. I think it's an underrated aspect to talk about the fact that their impact in pass defense, getting their drops, being able to actually spot drop a little bit better than what we were seeing before. I think people don't understand how much pressure it was putting on the secondary to not have the right people in the right places in a zone defense to be able to squeeze those windows. Talk about what you've seen there.
Well, when you're playing a lot of zones, so one of the things that has changed from the beginning of the season to now is we are seeing a little bit more of quarters. We're playing a little bit more middle of the field open defense, so we're not having that close post like the traditional Seahawks have that post safety in the middle of the field all the time. We're playing a little bit more Tampa. What that means is we are playing a lot of top-down defense. So there's going to be the free space is going to be in that intermediate, which means those linebackers have to drop. I mean, if you talk to defensive backs, primarily corners, one of the things that just irks them the most is when you're guarding an intermediate route, you have good defense, you're on top of the receiver, but you have zero help in the intermediate. The quarterback just literally has to just throw kind of underneath, let the receiver come back to the ball, and it's going to get caught. So that's one of the frustrating things. And then that feeds into the play. So when the corners and the safeties feel confident that the linebackers are going to be in their spot, they're going to be covering those open windows, that allows them to play a little bit tighter. That allows them to have a little bit more creative freedom, maybe take a couple of chances that they won't necessarily have if they're just like, look, we don't get any linebacker help. Because if you don't, you might as well just be playing man coverage. So to me, that's kind of been the big thing really since the bye week is just we're in, especially these last two games, is that the linebackers have been really playing really well in the pass. We're getting a lot of movement up front in the run game, which is cleaning things up for two linebackers that are fitting really well. So to me, everything is really piecing together.
So Cody, when we talk about secondary play, I think you since the offseason, when we first started talking, said you thought that the Seahawks had a cornerback 3 issue. We're not high on Trey Brown and what he was giving them. He got injured, and Josh Jobe seems to have Wally-pipped him a little bit, taking those snaps. Curious what you're seeing from Josh Jobe and where you'd put him in your kind of havoc rankings overall.
Well, that's what I had in my notes was when we're talking about the secondary for the Seahawks, you can't go on without saying one of the big differences has been the ability of Jobe to be able to hold down on that outside. He has, I think I looked at it, he has a really good havoc rating for us. I think he's around the 80s. So he is high up there. And that's a good rating. You want to be, if you're in the 80s, that means you're really good. In terms of just secondary, now you have a top 10 corner in Woolen. You have a top 20 corner in Witherspoon that's probably a top 5 nickel. So being able to have a top 40 corner, meaning that he can push for a starting role on any team, if you're top 32, that means you should be a starter somewhere in the NFL. So when you have that ability, that then allows Macdonald to have the trust that I can move Witherspoon back inside, and I know we're going to be able to hold it down on the outside. I don't have to always allocate a safety to your side, which then amplifies being able to drop Rayshon Jenkins now that he's healthy again, using Love as a weapon, because I think Love is one of the better safeties again in the NFL. So being able to move him around as a weapon. So what it does is having that third corner, and we've talked about this multiple times on here, is that having that third corner really unlocks the defense to be able to be a lot more multiple, which is what Macdonald wants, and that's the success of the Seahawks.
When you mentioned Julian Love, who's had a really solid season and been very consistent throughout, there's been a change next to him. Started out with Rayshon Jenkins. He got injured, and Kobe Bryant has slid into that spot. What are you seeing from the third-year safety, corner turn safety?
Yeah, Bryant really pops too. And I think what that allows, again, having a guy with cornerback skills now either allows you to play a little bit more man, move him around, but he also can play. You don't mind him playing in some of these match zones, and you can now drop Love because you feel like, okay, we can use Bryant is going to be serviceable in that intermediate, in that backside. So what it does, again, it goes back to when Macdonald was really successful with the Ravens and really cleaning that Ravens defense up, it was being multiple up front. It was being able to be multiple in the back end. And you have to be able to have multiple guys to do that, because you have to have that schematic fluidity of, if we play this in base, we have the same look in nickel, we can do the same thing in dime, and you're not necessarily reinventing the wheel, and your production stays the same because those guys know what they're doing and they're producing. So I do think the two kind of guys that are probably not going to be talked about enough is the fact that Job really has stepped into that role as a third corner. And then also Kobe Bryant has really become a solid contributor on defense, which again, it just kind of unlocks that defense.
I'm curious, Leonard Williams had a heck of a game against the Cardinals. When you look at him, you look at Byron Murphy, you look at Jaron Reed, it feels like they really invested in that defensive line to be a big part of what they were trying to do here. What are you seeing from those guys?
Well, Leonard Williams, I'm glad you brought him up, because, I mean, he is just knocking people back. He plays almost every down. You're really allowing like Reed and Murphy to rotate to keep those guys fresh at the nose spot, but Williams is just blowing people up. And then when they get in base, you bring in Robert Harris, who is also blowing people up. So what you're doing now is you're really resetting that line of scrimmage. It keeps the linebackers free. It amplifies their game again. And that's kind of the Ravens motto that is, I'm sure Macdonald uses with Seattle, is kind of stop the run to have some fun, right? So if we can stop the run, it allows us to do more fun things because we're on third down. That's when we can do our coverage rotations, when we can get after the pass rusher, which is what everybody wants to do, right? So to me, that has been him being a solid contributor up front, kind of expands into that whole theme of really being multiple and being able to live within your different packages.
I want to show you an image here, and you see these all over social media, but this is a look at interior defensive linemen on true pass sets, and their win rate is on one axis, and then their overall win rate is on the other. And what you're seeing here is Byron Murphy way over here. When it's a true pass set, his win rate is, basically second in the NFL among defensive tackles. You see Leonard Williams. Actually, I can highlight. Well, actually, I can't because that's the way I'm sharing it. But he's toward the middle here, right next to Jalen Carter and Quinnen Williams, who the Seahawks will face this week. And then you got Jaron Reed a little bit further down, but he's next to Zach Sealer, who's also quite good. So it seems like you're getting a lot from a lot of these interior players. Murphy, it feels like he's so far not having the game where you're like, he's taken over. But every game you look back and you're like, wow, there's a moment where he really flashes, and you can see a 22-year-old defensive tackle that might really grow into something over time.
Yeah, I think Seattle should be excited. I think he'll be able to play more downs as he just gets more physically present as he gets older in this system. But I think you can start seeing the framework that Macdonald brought. I think it's interesting because the same situation that was in Seattle was the same situation that was presented to Macdonald when he went to Baltimore. Hey, we have really fallen off defensively. We have some talented players. We need you to clean this up. Can you make this happen? Now, he has not had just the tremendous success that he had with the Ravens yet, but you can see the building blocks coming together. Interior defensive line play is stellar. They probably need to find some pass rush, or somebody needs to hit on the pass rush. But he was able to do that without premium pass rushers with the Ravens. And I think they're slowly getting to the point where they're probably a premium safety or a corner away from really being what he's looking for. So you can see the building blocks coming together, and the formula is working and it's coming together. And so it's really fun. It's really has been fun to watch, especially since they've gotten Ernest Jones, of really, okay, this makes sense. This is the Macdonald model. It's coming together.
Talking to Coach Cody Alexander of matchquarters.com. He's literally written multiple books about defense, so nobody knows it better. Cody, you talk about a couple positions there. I'm curious if you were setting up the shopping list for the off season for them to like, hey, to take the next step to be a little bit better than they are right now, what positional priorities would you set?
I'd probably look for another safety. I know that we talked about Rayshon Jenkins is really has kind of transitioned to being more of a box safety. Kayvon Wallace really just hasn't popped the way that he did last year. We're starting to see kind of a regression to the mean. Maybe I know he's on the IR, but if you can add somebody next to Love that gives you a little bit more of that ability to kind of move guys around, I think that that's what they really want. Just in terms of having that kind of Kyle Hamilton presence of being able to move a guy down and play a little bit more big nickel, especially as much 12 personnel, 21 personnel as I see in the division. And then I think you do need to invest in that corner room, and you probably need to kind of go after an edge rusher that you can always a gotta have it guy, a guy that I know no matter what we're going to be able to get a presence there. So I think you have a couple spots on each one. I think the biggest one would probably be you probably start on the D line. Probably need to have an edge rusher, a premium guy, whether that's early in the draft or somebody that you go after in free agency. But if I had a wish list, it is almost Christmas. So if I had a wish list, it would be having an edge rusher to kind of really solidify that front.
Well, you mentioned safety, and there's a guy that's caught my eye. Probably not realistic, but I'm curious. Talanoa Hufanga is going to be a free agent. I don't think the Niners are going to have enough money to re-sign him. Is he a fit for what Macdonald needs?
I think so. And I think because of the way that the 49ers structure, they play a lot of quarters and they play a lot of cover one. And he can play down near the box. He can play in coverage. I think that he's an all-pro guy, obviously had the injury, but that's somebody too that within the division you're familiar with. That's somebody that if you could pick him up, that really adds a lot of value. Now you have two solid starters, and then you can kind of use that Jenkins as kind of that big nickel if you need him to come in, because we know that he can play really well near the box. But it gives you that multiplicity because Love can play near the box as well. Hufanga can. So you see where you're going with that. It's like I've got three guys that can play back, can play forward. Now we can really start mixing and matching, which is what has kind of been the catalyst for Macdonald. And we're seeing this also with Minter, with the Chargers, because they come from the same system, is having that multiplicity, the schematic fluidity from one thing to the other. We're moving guys around. So it looks different to you, but to us, it's the same thing.
Got a couple super chats here. One from Dr. Vince says, great guest, Brian. Love Coach Cody's insights. I agree with you there. And then Jacoby says, what's your view on Uchenna Nwosu's return and how that will impact the defense and how well they're doing right now? So Uchenna Nwosu won't be back this week, Cody, but he'll likely be back the following week. What do you think he adds to this defense?
Well, it gives you the ability to get Jones off the field. So you now have two true edge rushers on the field. I think too, it gives you can have that third down nickel package that you want. It just adds value in that way. Two, he was having a really good year at the very beginning, just kind of rushing the passer. So hopefully that can kind of interject some juice into it and you can kind of get the same production you were at the beginning of the year. So those would be the things that I would look forward to, is being able to have maybe play a little bit more 3-4 base with kind of two edge rushers. You're able to do that, but you just haven't had that stand-up edge production that you've had since the beginning of the season.
You mentioned Draymond Jones. The Seahawks might have a decision to make on him next year. Do you think that they move on from him after this season?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting ask, because he's shown flashes as a true rush tackle. You move him outside, and because of his athletic ability, they did the same thing with the Broncos. They used him almost as kind of like that Aaron Donald role, right? Where he can play 3 all the way to a 5. You can use him as a pass rusher. You can move him as a pass rusher inside. But I think with the production that you're getting on the inside, it's kind of a log jam inside, and you're kind of looking more for early down production. And so to me, I think that he might be one of those casualties of just not fitting in to what they're trying to do, because he's not necessarily adding a lot of production in the pass rush that you would want from kind of that guy that can move down and back, but then also too in the run fitting game, you won't want to necessarily move him inside just so he can just go mash heads.
What do you think this defense is capable of the rest of the year? What, is this a top 10 defense? Is this a top 5 defense? Do you think that they regress back and they're really just a top 15 or top 20 defense? Like, where roughly do you think that they fit in the landscape of the NFL?
I think now, if they can they can put everything together, they can keep continuously growing. That's a defense that I think can sit in that 11 to 15 range and be above average defensively. I still think that there are some holes that they have. They're still not as good as you would want them to be against the run. But I do think that the pass rush production has increased. So I see that this being a defense that, as more diversity is entered in, this is a team that we're going to look up next year and maybe can be, hey, in the last 4 weeks, we were a top 10 defense. Why can't we be a top 10 defense now for the rest of the season, for the next season?
That's interesting. Here you say that you still see some gaps in the run game. What's your thought there?
Well, it's been a problem. Sometimes linebackers get buried up. Sometimes we don't necessarily reset the line of scrimmage. A lot of this defense is predicated on those inside guys winning and kind of keeping everybody clean. And again, some of these better defensive lines those offensive lines, it just doesn't necessarily show up. Part of that has just been the fact that you can't have Murphy on the field all the time. Lawrence does a really good job, but just having that presence on the edges as well, right? Of just kind of having those mashers in there. So that's just been one thing. If you really look at it, I mean, the production has been there, right? But in the pass rush, but you would like to see some more tackles for loss, a higher stop rate in the run game. And so that's kind of the evolution that I think can happen towards the end of the year as people get more comfortable in what Macdonald's trying to do.
When you look across the NFC West, the Cardinals, the Rams, the 49ers, and the Seahawks, which of those groups in general do you find is best set up to be building on the defensive side of the ball over the next few seasons?
I really think that the young core with the Rams up front will help them as they transition to find more players in the secondary. They've had some young guys, but I don't necessarily see some of those young guys as long-term answers. The 49ers, to me, are at an impasse. They're going to have to start paying guys. You mentioned that. I just don't think that they're just going to recycle and put together a super team. Again, I think they're kind of at a point offensively and defensively of like, okay, we need to move on to the 2.0 era of what are we going to look like next for the next Super Bowl run, if that's what we're going to do. I think Seattle is in a really good position. Like we talked about, they're only a couple of players away from being, an elite defense. The Cardinals, to me, are interesting because of the production that they're getting from defensively without having players. We obviously know that they're going to have a lot of cap room. The guys that they went out and got are really interesting to me, like a Mac Wilson, where he was just kind of a guy on the Patriots that they used as kind of this. He really was an edge. And then now he's kind of become this blitzing linebacker for them. I think if they can get a couple of guys, they like their two corners. Obviously, we know about their safeties. You can get a couple guys on the front. That could be a dangerous defense. They're kind of like, they have the same trajectory as the Seahawks. So to me, if we're looking at it all, I think the Cardinals probably have the best set up for having, that jump to an elite defense next year with just a few tweaks, but Seattle's right there with them.
Interesting. Let's flip over to the other offensive side of the ball for a second. I know you're a defensive specialist, but Seahawks started off the season quite strong on the offensive side, and it's just been a struggle lately. What are you seeing there? And specifically, Cody, how much do you put on the shoulders of the offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, versus the personnel versus something else?
Well, I think the personnel fits what Grubb. I see the vision. I see what it is. I think a lot of this it's been endemic. Like if I ever want to see really good pass rush clips, I'm watching whoever's playing the Seattle Seahawks. It just is. You go and you look at it, the pass block, ESPN's pass block win rate, I think they're 25th. I think run block win rate, they're like bottom. I think they're in the 30s. And so it shows up on tape as well. They'll steal some guys. It'll look like it's a really good rush. You're like, okay, I feel good about it. And then they'll have 3 negative runs the next time they call runs. And then it's, then that predictability of, okay, we can't run the ball. We come out from halftime and we're just going to let Geno cook. We're going to let him throw the ball around. And when you become predictable, I think that we've kind of DK Metcalf, I think we kind of understand the jury is out on him. I think we understand he is a number 1 receiver, but he's not in that elite top 10 tier. He's a great go ball guy. Probably was really good when Russell Wilson was there and they were just throwing fade routes all the time. But now that you're playing a little bit more of a nuanced offense, you want intermediate routes. That's where we're seeing the Jackson Smith and Jigba kind of come up. And so to me, I think that's what it is. If they can keep Geno standing up and they can have a complete run game, then they tend to do well. But when they get into some of these games, and I think that's been one of the things, the last 3 games, they've been able to kind of run the ball a little bit better. Obviously, Arizona, it wasn't as good as you wanted it. But they've been able to run the ball a little bit better. That's what they need. They really need to clean up that offensive line almost more than anything else, and kind of solidify that. And then you start, I'm a big believer in game control, which means you have to be able to run the ball in order to control the game. You pass to score, but you run the ball to win. And by winning, you control the game. You control the clock. You are able, when you get up, to play that 4-minute offense, right? That to hold on to those wins. And so to me, that's been the issue with the Seattle offense. It's not scheme, because I think we're getting the receiver production that we want. Geno's playing well. Even with throwing 11 interceptions, he's still a top 5 quarterback in our threat rating at Field Vision. So a lot of these aren't necessarily his fault. He's having to throw into tight windows. He's having to throw in duress. And so to me, that offensive line is really the catalyst for a lot of these problems that we're seeing with the Seahawks.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of folks are looking at Ryan Grubb as the problem. And I'm curious, when you got an offensive line like this, some might say, well, the coordinator could be doing things to help. He could be rolling out the quarterback more, or calling more, different screenplays or other things that can help. It sounds like you don't have that you don't see it as largely an OC issue.
Well, I get the whole deal of like moving the pocket and doing some things like that. The problem is we're in an ecosystem in the NFL where attacking the edges is something that NFL defenses have gotten really good at defending, right? We have edge rushers that are going to go straight to the quarterback on boot action. Everybody knows how to defend the wide zone now. They're setting up either wide 9s, or they're getting in a 5-man front. They're getting those edges really super wide. So that doesn't really do much for you. Gap scheme versus zone scheme. How are you going to play that? I think that really it comes down to the players are there. Right. I think everybody likes Kenneth Walker as a running back. I think people understand that Geno Smith is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. We like our receiving core. I think the bottom line is it really comes down to, it would be nice to maybe have a kind of a premium tight end that would probably opens up some things a little bit in the middle of the field. So you're not so reliant on those receivers to get open. But also too, I think it comes down to the analytics doesn't lie. I mean, the offensive line is one in the bottom third of the NFL. And if it's in the bottom third, and you're looking at Geno, and I'm telling you, he's a top 5 quarterback this year in production. It comes down to the fact that they just can't protect him enough, and they can't control the game in the sense that they just can't get some access in that run game.
Fantastic stuff from Coach Cody Alexander at matchquarters.com. Coach, what do you have coming up that people should check out at Match Quarters?
Yeah, I just dropped an article on what's called Storm Check. It's a Fangio term, but it talks about kind of how we've kind of evolved in defending 12 personnel stuff. I've got some things coming down with some self-scout video this Thursday. So I've got, and two, again, if you're interested in any of this stuff, I've got plenty of examples of what Mike Macdonald's doing on defense over at Match Quarters. Just type in his name in the search tool and they'll pop up.
Amazing. Coach Cody Alexander from matchquarters.com. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, Cody. Enjoy the ham.
You too. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you. That is Coach Cody Alexander. And folks, great stuff as always from him. I want to catch you up on what's going to be happening here on Hawk Blogger. So, tomorrow we will have first look. So tonight on hawkblogger.com, you will see Tail of the Tape. I'll be working on that today. Tomorrow we will have first look tomorrow morning. Can't wait to do that. We will dive into this Jets matchup very deeply. Tomorrow night, Wednesday night, 6 o'clock, Evan Hill, Jeff Simmons will be on with me for Real Hawk Talk. Thursday morning, you will have Big Ray Roberts. Big Ray's Rewind will air at 8 a.m. Thursday morning, Thanksgiving morning. That will be an instant premiere. It will not be live, but it will be something that you can watch all together, chat together, enjoy together. So that'll be 8 a.m. Thursday morning for Thanksgiving. Friday morning, Mike Sando will be on at normal time, 8 a.m. That will also be an instant premiere. I will be flying out to New York for the Jets-Seahawks game, but you will also be able to watch that together. And then I will figure out Saturday with Jeff Simmons and when we do Seahawks Saturday and all that good stuff. So lots of good stuff coming up for you. Going to keep our streak alive. This is 247 straight days. We will keep pushing through. While we're at it, if you haven't given the show a like and click subscribe, we're up to over 13,000 subscribers. Let's get to 14 as soon as possible. And also, really, really cool stuff going on at jkboots.com. Use code HawkBlogger. Right now, we're in their Black Friday deals. They're going each day is a new deal. So if you use code HawkBlogger, not only will you get a chance to win a Seahawks-themed pair of boots, and get a chance to help the Wildland Firefighters Foundation get another pair donated for a Northwest Forest firefighter. But today, the 26th, any Western boot you purchase comes with a JK leather billfold wallet and a boot jack while supplies last. So special deal today. If you don't see this, you want to do it tomorrow, the 27th. Any boot purchase other than Western or Warehouse comes with a free resole service. So I guess if you ever need to get it resold, you'll be able to get it resold. These are unbelievable. I got to pick up my pair, show you again. I wore these yesterday for the first time, and they're friggin' fantastic. I love these. I want to wear them all the time. There's just, I feel taller. I feel stronger. I love wearing them, man. So Spokane-based company, help them out, support them, and get a friggin' amazing pair of boots. Hawk Blogger is the promo code. Do that. And as well, go to ftnfantasy.com, use promo code HBAM, gets you 15% off there. All right, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will get a ton more coming to you soon. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. I am Brian Emhouse. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and now Blue Sky at Hawk Blogger. This has been episode 247 of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care, y'all.